Welcome into the Heat Report by Chat Sports. I am your host, Nic Rohloff. Hopefully everyone had a good weekend, and Miami might have gotten some good news on a Monday morning. Is a Giannis Antetokounmpo trade still on the table and possible for Miami? This was one of the main talking points earlier this offseason. Could Giannis ask out of the organization? But after moves made where they acquired Miles Turner, they waived Damian Lillard, and made some other signings, people were like, all right, is this meaning he's staying? Does this mean he's leaving? He hasn't requested a trade to this point. But maybe he still could, because Shams Charania was on Get Up this morning with ESPN and had a very interesting one-liner around Antetokounmpo. He said that sources tell him there is nothing set in stone about whether Giannis Antetokounmpo will stay in Milwaukee or whether he will be leaving. There's some good conversations over the last week or so. The constant question that Giannis has thought, can I win a championship with this roster? Is this roster going to be one for this upcoming year and the following? He's asking that question over and over. And if you've watched our content this offseason, we made probably about 2 or 3 videos on Giannis earlier in the offseason before the KD stuff got underway. And I consistently said in those videos that I don't know why Giannis would want to stay in Milwaukee if he was serious about winning a title over the next 2 or 3 years. Now, this was before the Miles Turner sign and trade and the waiving of Damian Lillard. That roster around him just was not good, and Dame was going to be out for this entire year. Now, they did obviously move on from Dame, and they brought in Miles Turner, but are we really going to sit here and believe that a Kyle Kuzma-Miles Turner duo behind Giannis can actually help them win a title? I know the East is pretty weak right now because of the injuries to Indiana and Boston, but I don't know if Antetokounmpo's greatness will be able to overcome the holes on this roster outside of him. So I'm not sure that if he asks them that question, he might not answer I can't and request a trade. More coming here on Giannis, but help spread the word here of the Heat Report. It's a little bit of a slow time in the offseason, so we want to try to reach new audiences. And the best way to help us out is by sharing today's video. You could send it to a friend, family member, coworker, or just put it on social media. You know what? If you tag me on Twitter at Nic_Rohloff, I'll give you a shout out on a future show. Now, briefly, when we think about Miami potentially going after Giannis, I said this earlier in the offseason. I think Miami could create a real compelling offer for Giannis to pry him away from Milwaukee if he did request a trade. Now, the Heat's offer would not come with a boatload of draft capital, which who knows if that is something Milwaukee would want, probably, considering they don't have a lot of their own draft capital. But Miami has really good contracts and a lot of good young players, and they should absolutely be on the table for a player of Antetokounmpo's caliber. We're talking about a top 3 player in the National Basketball Association. You can make the argument whether he's number 2 or number 3, but he is inside that top 3 without a question of hesitation. If I'm going to rank my top 3 players in the NBA, it is without a doubt going to be Nikola Jokic 1, it's going to be Shai Gilgeous-Alexander 2, and I'm going to put Giannis number 3. That's how I view it. But Giannis is still 29 years of age. He still has a lot of good years left, and I know there's some questions on if he would be able to be effective late into his career, since he doesn't really have a three-point shot. I still think he is going to be a top 5, top 10 player in the league without question over the next 5 to 6 seasons. He's still got some good time left in him. So, yeah, everything would be on the table where a Giannis trade. So, pin comment on today's show. So, if you're here with YouTube ad break, scroll down, let it play, and answer the question. Should Miami go out and try to acquire Giannis if he requests a trade? Type Y for yes or type N for no. I clearly want yes, but here are some potential destinations. Me and Jeffrey Cooperstein were thinking about the top 5 potential landing spots if a trade request happened. These are my 5 that we came up with. I think the Knicks and Heat are the top 2 teams in the Eastern Conference. I think Brooklyn is there potentially. We've heard rumblings that Giannis would be interested to go there, but I'm not so sure if that is serious or not. They do have a lot of draft capital, so they can offer a pretty solid trade. Dallas and San Antonio are the 2 teams in the West that I think would be very intriguing. The Spurs can offer a lot. Pair him up with Wemby would be scary. Dallas has a good offer as well. They can just try to swap Anthony Davis for Giannis, maybe some draft capital added alongside AD, or they could make a offer where it's Cooper Flag and salary. And I think Milwaukee would have to seriously contemplate that as well. And I would probably prefer that package over Anthony Davis and draft picks if I were the Milwaukee Bucks. But I think these 5 teams make a lot of sense. And I briefly mentioned this a second ago, and I'll re-hit this point. If Giannis requests a trade from the Bucks and is actually available on the trade market, you do everything in your power to acquire him. You just don't see players of this caliber be on the move often, if we're going to be honest, ever. And since Luka Doncic extended with the Los Angeles Lakers and the pipe dream of signing him in free agency next year is gone, the best option you have of acquiring a 1A caliber player that can lead you to a title is via trade. And I don't really think this is that likely, but there's a chance. Anthony Edwards will be a player people point to. I don't really think there's that high of a chance with that one either. So I just don't really know what Miami would do. But we know there has always been interest with Giannis in Miami from the Heat side of things as well as from Antetokounmpo. There are a couple players around the league that I think Miami would be their first choice to join that organization if they actually were to request a trade. I think Luka was one of them. I do think Anthony Edwards is one of them. And I think Giannis is one of them. Now, they actually have to request a trade from where they currently are, and I don't really know if that's really likely, but there is always going to be interest from both parties. And Miami, as I mentioned, has a lot that they can offer. They have multiple draft picks and a ton of draft swaps that they can send. They have expiring salary with Terry Rozier if they needed to. They have an interesting player in Andrew Wiggins. They have 2 cornerstone guys in Hero and Bam. And they have young players in Nikola Jovic, Kasper Siakachonis, and Kel'el Ware. Like, I am sorry, I am not going to let national pundits potentially say Miami wouldn't be able to get in the stratosphere with an Antetokounmpo trade. Do we have 5 or 6 first-round picks we can offer like some teams out there? No, we do not. But with the moderate draft capital you have, you could pair that up with different veteran contracts that are valuable and young players, and it could really make sense for the Bucks to potentially go with an offer that Miami has. That is why I truly do believe if Giannis requested a trade, Miami would absolutely be interested. And I think Giannis would be interested in Miami, and the Heat would have an offer that could get them in the ballpark of potentially getting a deal done. And just coming up in a second, we are going to take a look at a couple of potential Giannis trade ideas and then give you my thoughts on each one. But take advantage of this Heat Culture hoodie sale. It's 50% off. Usually $70, now $35 when you go to chatsports.com/culture sale. Links in the description and comments of today's video. 3X is gone, but they got small, medium, large, extra large, and 2X is still available. Grab yours right now. And speaking of right now, what would a Giannis trade look like? We did a video, like I mentioned, about 2-3 months ago about different Giannis Antetokounmpo trade ideas. I think I've dwindled it down to 2. We did 3 earlier where it was Hero trade package, a Bam trade package, and then a trade offer where you try to keep both Bam and Hero. I'm going to leave Bam out of it because I do not think Miami would trade Bam for Giannis. He is their guy, and it would be trying to pair Giannis and Bam together as a front court duo, which, by the way, I think would be the best defensive duo in the front court in NBA history. So it would be fun to see that come to play just in its own right. But let's take a look at Giannis trade idea number 1. And this is where you put Tyler Hero in the package. It would be Hero, Wiggins, and then your first-round pick from this year, Kasper Siakachonis, plus 2 unprotected first-round picks in 2030 and 2032, plus a first-round pick swap in 26, 28, 29, and 31. So you're giving up the rights to every pick you own currently from now until 2032. I know it's a lot, but like I mentioned, we're talking about Giannis. And some people might say it's too much. Well, I'm sorry. If you are in the mindset of acquiring Antetokounmpo, you're going to have to offer everything that you have, especially if you are not sending Adebayo just to be able to compete with packages from the Knicks, from the Mavericks, from the Nets. So, like, you're going to have to do this. And this would be a trade I would be fine making because you would be able to have a starting lineup that I think is the number one starting lineup in the Eastern Conference. You would still have Davion Mitchell. You would be able to still keep Norman Powell in this trade, and he becomes your starting two guard. I would probably start Nikola Jovic to have another playmaker, ball handler, and shooter in this starting lineup, and then start Giannis and Bam as your 4-5. But as you know, we did not put Kel'el Ware in this trade offer, at least the first one, so he would be able to be your backup center and play alongside Giannis, play alongside Bam. Still, it gives you a lot of versatility. You still have Larson, Highsmith, Jaquez, Fontecchio off the bench. It would be a very deep team still, even if you made that massive trade. So I would be willing to include Tyler Hero in that potential deal. But here is the trade package number 2, where you try to keep Tyler Hero. Instead of Hero, you still have Wiggins and Jonas, but you include Norman Powell and Kel'el Ware. And I actually think that is very fair. If you were to think of Tyler Hero's trade value, I think a young player like Kel'el Ware and a veteran scoring guard like Norman Powell would make sense in terms of value. So I would still include the 2 first-round picks and 4 pick swaps because I think Powell and Ware are similar value. The Bucks, in this case, would get 2 young players in Jonas and Ware, all of the draft capital, 2 veterans to keep them relatively competitive, to have a lineup where it would be Powell, Wiggins, Kuzma, Miles Turner, and then you have the young guard as well. And then your starting lineup in this hypothetical would obviously no Ware and no Norman Powell. You're probably starting Hero and Davion Mitchell in the backcourt together. And instead of going with a Jovic or Jaquez, I would actually like to start Haywood Highsmith with this group for more defensive purposes because that would be the best defensive front court in the NBA, 3 through 5. And it would help mask Tyler Hero's defensive liabilities, especially with Davion Mitchell in the backcourt. And then you could have Jovic coming off the bench with Larson, with Jaquez still. So that is another way where it makes me very intrigued by that potential package. And the final thing I'll say on a potential Giannis trade. Obviously, I would want to keep Hero if I could because a Hero and Giannis pick and roll and combo offensively would be just so damn fun. And it would keep Bam as that like third option offensively, which is probably where he thrives. Second best player, but third option on the offensive end. But I would be fine trading Hero, assuming you are keeping Norman Powell. Hero is contract eligible soon. I am not going to pay him the max $50 million per season. So if I can move off of him and trade him at his highest value right now and get a Giannis in return, who is very much worth $55-60 million per season, I would be fine doing that because I also have Norman Powell who can just fill that 2-guard scoring backcourt role that Tyler Hero currently has, and then you would just start Davion Mitchell at the 1. I would be very fine with that. But let me know your thoughts down in the comments, and make sure you subscribe to the channel as well for more daily Heat content. We're in the dog days of the offseason, just a couple months away from training camp in the preseason, but we're still bringing content every single day, so subscribe for more.